a UN climate negotiator says informal climate talks will be critical to any new world treaty. Europe is formally backing the IPCC's climate science, and a major union is urging Congress not to overturn EPA's endangerment finding.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
Good morning, I'm Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for the Energy Report on this 16th day of March 2010. As the world sets its sights on Mexico for the COP16 climate conference, one negotiator says formal talks are becoming less important. Special UN climate envoy Gro Harlem Brundtland says what emerged from Copenhagen, that accord reached by world leaders outside the formal negotiations, that's the kind of agreement that will play a critical role as the world moves toward a binding international climate treaty. Brundtland foresees more of a double-track system with outside talks like this plus the UN framework system. Brundtland adds that what happened in Copenhagen will be a base for the negotiations leading to Mexico in late November. European Union environment ministers are supporting climate scientists now under fire for errors in a landmark UN climate report. Criticism's been growing since the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change admitted that its 2007 report contained errors over how fast the Himalayan glaciers would melt and how much of the Netherlands is prone to sea flooding. EU ministers say despite the errors, they consider the IPCC's science solid and robust and consider the huge report the most authoritative assessment of climate change. The ministers also called for quick mobilization of that $10 billion a year that developed nations promised in Copenhagen to help poor nations deal with climate change. The United Auto Workers Union wants Congress to keep its hands off the EPA's endangerment finding. Union leaders fired off a letter to lawmakers on Monday, urging them to reject resolutions in both houses aimed at nullifying last year's endangerment finding, the basis for proposed regulations under the Clean Air Act. The union says the proposals threaten nationwide auto mileage and emission standards proposed last year. Overturning EPA's endangerment finding would unravel the historic agreement on one national standard for fuel economy and greenhouse gas emissions for light-duty vehicles that was negotiated by the Obama administration last year, the letter reads. If that were to happen, California and other states would certainly move forward with their standards, thereby subjecting auto manufacturers to all of the burdens that the one national standard was designed to avoid. The author of one of those resolutions, Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski, says she does not want EPA imposing economically harmful climate regulations. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce wants EPA to reconsider its endangerment finding. In a statement, the Chamber said the group believes bipartisan legislation and comprehensive international agreements are the way to lower greenhouse gas emissions. The statement said EPA has already acknowledged the absurdity of regulating greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act, and it said EPA is admitting that an expansion of regulations would leave businesses waiting months or years to get permits to keep operating justifies reopening this process. It wants the agency to stay the endangerment finding until it can act on the Chamber's request for reconsideration, which it says focuses on EPA's own admissions, not on scientific issues related to climate change. Energy Secretary Chu says the U.S. will come in dead last in the race toward clean energy if Congress does not act to put a price on carbon. Chu told the National League of Cities on Monday in Washington that without a price on carbon, private funding for clean energy technology and projects has stalled. He says the government has done its part with the stimulus and tax credits, but without private investment, the clean technology sector here in the U.S., he says, will not grow. The secretary says China, on the other hand, is leading the clean energy revolution. That country investing $9 billion a month to expand its energy sector. 21 nuclear reactors are being built, as well as high-efficiency coal plants. In the U.S., he said there's a much different scenario.
The cost of oil and other forms of energy will rise in the coming decades. The risks of climate change are becoming increasingly apparent. We will live in a carbon-constrained world. China, in particular, but other countries are seeing an economic opportunity, are moving aggressively. I think in the upcoming legislation, there are a lot of carrots there, tax credits, ECBG, all those things, renewable portfolio or clean energy standards. I agree with all those things. But we also need a long-term signal that there will be a price on carbon. It could leak in slowly over many, many years. But unless you have that long-term signal, 20, 30, 40, 50 years out, if you're a utility company, you can't get a loan to put carbon capture and sequestration on your next power plant. Banks say, hey, there's no price on carbon, we're not going to give you this loan. Rate commission won't allow you to increase by 1/10 of 1 cent the cost. Everything is on hold. Capital is now on hold because we're in limbo.
Another mine accident in China has killed 25 people. Last night, an electrical fire broke out at an illegal mine in Henan province near Xinmi City. An official with the government there says the mine's owner, manager, and an investor have been detained by police. China's coal mines are the deadliest in the world despite government efforts to reduce fatalities. Most accidents are blamed on failure to comply with mine safety rules. Well, Illinois is home to more nuclear power plants than any other state, and now the state legislature may end a ban on construction of new nuclear plants. The state Senate voted 40-1 to end this 23-year-old ban that was imposed a year after Chernobyl on fears that Illinois may turn into a repository for out-of-state nuclear waste. That's one of the arguments critics are now using in opposing ending this ban. But the sponsors say the policy change is needed to position the state for billions of federal dollars headed for new nuclear construction and to create jobs. They say the 10 reactors in operation have long, safe operating records. The one senator who did vote no said the state should focus on increasing wind and solar capacity. This legislation now moves to the House. Montana Governor Brian Schweitzer wants to stop any oil or gas drilling near Glacier National Park. He's asking Interior Secretary Salazar to cancel leases on more than 200,000 acres. There's been little movement to develop 700 parcels since leases were sold in the 1980s. But Schweitzer is worried any drilling would breach a conservation agreement with British Columbia that was signed last month. Canada has halted several gold, natural gas, and coal mining projects in the upstream watershed. Dave Galt with the Montana Petroleum Association says that land should remain open to drilling, but at least lease owners must be compensated for cancellations. Solar companies making thin film photovoltaics are putting their heads together to find ways to bring down costs. The firms are meeting this week in Toledo, where First Solar was created. The goal is to make it cheaper to install solar panel systems in homes, businesses, and utilities. Company leaders envision a widespread use of PV technology that could help the U.S. reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce dependence on foreign oil by providing clean electricity for vehicles. They're keeping costs down by using new materials like cadmium telluride to make thin film cells and streamlining their manufacturing. First Solar predicts it will match the cost of conventional electricity in 4 to 5 years. A coalition representing governors of 29 states is urging the federal government to take steps to boost wind energy. The bipartisan Governors Wind Energy Coalition plans to make recommendations today, asking Congress and the White House to require utilities to produce at least 10% of their energy from renewable sources by 2012. The coalition, chaired by Iowa Governor Chet Culver, also urges support for offshore wind development and new infrastructure for electric transmission, among other things. Let's take a look now at some energy goings-on around the Beltway today. 9 a.m. the National League of Cities started continuing its meetings on energy efficiency and sustainability at the Marriott Wardman Park Hotel. Tom Vilsack and Gary Locke are scheduled to speak. Clean Skies News is there. At 1 p.m., Iowa Governor Chet Culver, Rhode Island Governor Donald Carcieri will hold a conference call as they release Great Expectations, the Governor's Wind Energy Coalition's 2010 recommendations. That's the Energy Report. Thanks for joining us here in the Energy News Center. For any suggestions or comments regarding our programming here on Clean Skies News, you can email us at contact@cleanskies.com, and you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Susan McGinnis. You're watching Clean Skies News.